What's up, man? We are live again. This is Block Thinking. My name is Werner, and my friend on the right-hand side, potentially your left-hand side, is Jonathan Gull, and we are both in Warsaw. No, in Poland.
Yeah, in Poland, not in Warsaw yet.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I'm trying.
You in Warsaw?
I am in Warsaw.
You in Warsaw.
Yeah, you in Kielce.
Yeah.
And you are listening.
Yeah.
I need to do the voice, the radio voice. You are listening to Block Thinking. So, Jonathan, how's it going, mate?
I'm good. I've been very busy, very busy, working on my project Unema, and trying to get new clients. And about clients, I had a little story.
Oh yeah.
I almost closed on a new project.
Serious?
And when I say almost, it's one signature was missing on 5 or 6 of them, and it didn't work out. That's why the topic we are going to tackle today is something I'm super interested in. So we are going to talk about proposal.
Indeed.
And how to close them, how to succeed, and not to do like John and lose your work hours and hours on your proposal and lose it at the last minute.
Man.
So that's why we're united once again this week.
Yes, and don't lose faith. Hopefully we'll be able to help you with a few tips and tricks around getting proposals done. So there's a few disclaimers here, or a little bit of background, because like, why the hell should this weird South African guy be talking about proposals? So I spent a fair amount of time in my consulting gig working on the front end, and I think this is one of the most coolest experience and sometimes humbling and interesting experiences when you work on high-end kind of sales things, because, and we don't like to necessarily talk about sales, we talk about new business development, right? And that in itself is kind of a tricky process, but I spent a lot of time there, and especially in the last year, I had like a solid, like a sales target on my KPIs. I needed to convert business, and when that becomes a reality, you start looking at sales in a completely different way. Also, like a lot of the business, also being an entrepreneur now, right? Sales is like a really big part of your business, and other thing that I want to say that I need to comment on also is that some of the content that I'm going to be sharing today is really rooted in the experience that I have, and Jonathan, you're also going to add value. But then also there's a whole bunch of books and people that I'm going to be indirectly referencing. So if this sounds familiar, some of this, we'll post a lot of these links in the show notes. And also a lot of the things that I'm going to be talking about is thanks to people who've been working on this process way before me. But hopefully this will be useful. So the first thing that I think we need to talk about, Jono, is who are you selling to? So when you go out and you want to win new business, the most critical thing that you have to figure out and think about is like, who are you selling to? And this is actually very strange, right? Because earlier this week I was talking to a potential client of mine, and we were talking about designing a process to help the team create better designs. And what was interesting about it, we were talking in a very structured way, and then I thought to myself, but wait, we are actually designing something here. Why should I not use my design processes to actually design the design process? And it sounds a bit weird, but I think the big thing, and a lot of people who are in our target audience are familiar with the idea of design thinking, empathy, and all these things. Do not forget to apply that kind of thinking to the way that you approach proposals, because the key thing here is to understand who this person is and what is their pains, gain, hope, fear, and what are they thinking about when you go into the sales process, right? So Jonathan, you said earlier that you had a bit of a challenge. There was one signature missing, right? That closed the deal for you.
Exactly.
Or could close the deal.
Exactly. And my mistake was exactly what you just told about. I missed one of the main character that wasn't in front of me in that negotiation, but had the ability to say no to the discussion.
Exactly.
And I targeted the folks front of me, and it went well. I had approvals, and I didn't see the the bigger picture. I should have had the information. That was my mistake. I should have digged for that information,
Yeah.
and not just stayed where I was.
Yeah.
And then that person decided that I wasn't a good fit. And because they had the power to say no, my interlocutors came back to me to tell me,
Yeah.
yeah, we're sorry,
Sorry, dude.
that's
Yeah,
it.
and this leads into the first thing that you need to realize, and we had a fat debate about it when we were talking about the topic of the show, because you really have to push yourself really hard and ask the 5 whys or the 5 who's, maybe in this case, right? About who you're
Right.
actually selling to, because it's not always very clear. And just to give you a breakdown of what this looks like. So, for example, there's 3 characters at play, or stakeholders when you sell, right? So first is the seller, it's you. The second person is usually a gatekeeper, and then you have a buyer. Now, what happens to us designers, and it depends on what level you're working at, is that you usually tend to work, and I think this happened to you, is you work with a gatekeeper. Now, the thing with the gatekeeper has the power to say no, but they can't say yes. Right, so I mean, I remember just to share kind of a story to make this more real, is that when I was at, I keep on talking about ad agency stories, right? So I'm going to do this again. Sorry, but when we were pitching new creative ideas in advertising, we usually pitch to either a marketing manager or whatever. And once I realized that marketing manager actually has to go back to her business stakeholders and then repitch our idea, I started realizing that we weren't actually selling to the marketing manager, we were selling to the business, right? So I started shifting what we were doing, because if you start thinking about selling to the buyer, you can shape your proposal in a way that aligns with the hopes, dreams, and fears of the buyer, right? And as an entrepreneur, my biggest kind of piece of advice that I would urge you to do, and sometimes you have to use some trickery, is that you have to have at least one conversation or try and connect with who's buying, right? Who's buying, who's actually paying for it. Now, remember, you might say, but Werner, that is the CEO. And I'm not talking about the CEO here. So usually the CEO, and I'm simplifying this, gives money to different departments and then different managers. So for example, when I was a senior manager, I had certain budgets that I had to work with, right? So if I spend something, I have to report, but I'm still a buyer. I can take elements of my budget and pay for something, right? My boss doesn't care what I spend the money on, as long as I don't spend it on nightclubs. You know, it needs to push the business forward, right? But I'm buying, right? But if I get one of my consultants, whatever, to interview you, he's not buying because he doesn't have the power to give you the money. So the thing is, you have to try and get into a conversation with the buyer. And the thing is, we're talking about proposals here, but this is so true even if you go and apply for a job.
Yeah. And this is where I am actually a little ashamed of myself in that proposal. I think that was one of my biggest proposal as an independent, as an entrepreneur. However, before that, I was used to find the who when I was going through job negotiations. So I'm going to give an example.
Yeah.
Recently, a friend of mine contacted me because that a job opportunity in a big software company in Poland, right? And he asked me, okay, what do I need to do? Do I need to focus on my portfolio? Do I need to work on my CV and so and so? And I was telling him, don't forget that your goal is not to impress the designers in front of you.
Yeah.
Your goal is to impress the head of design. So he wants to make sure that you're somebody who is going to work well in his team, that you're somebody who is going to learn. And you don't need to have all the Framer, Figma principle, all the tools on your CV. That's not the point. The point is that he wants to make sure that you're going to basically help him succeed on his own KPI. This is the only thing he's interested in.
Yeah.
Everything else, all the fancy dribble, whatever stuff, there is a minimum you need to have, right? You
can't walk in there with photos of your mom, right? You have to you have to prove that you can do stuff. But the thing is, I think what you're trying to say, Jonathan, this is so true, because I've had conversations where people ask me like, what should be my portfolio, what should not be. I say, whatever things that need to be in your portfolio is the things that aligns or makes the hopes and dreams and the desires of whoever's going to hire you think like, holy shit, this guy can do what I need him to do, right? And it's not about skill sets, is that, and I think this is where you have to scratch away, because, and we're going to get into how we set up a proposal, and that might align with your portfolio too, but the thing is, you really need to focus on, cool, what does the organization want to do, right? So like, where does the organization want to go? But the other thing, and this is where people miss the point all the time, is that the person who buys, right, the person who purchases from you, who wants to get your service or whatever you want to do with consulting, whatever, he's got dreams too. So he either wants to become famous. I mean, I've worked with people who really, they bask in the glory of winning awards. I don't give a shit, right? But if I can get them to win awards, I can do whatever I want, right? And they're going to pay me whatever I'm going to charge them, because they go, Werner is going to realize my dreams, right? So try and think about the dreams and the objectives of the person who's actually paying for your services, right? And then, of course, align them with the objectives of the organization. The other thing I would also say, though, which is different to setting up negotiations and proposals, is that what you need to be careful with. So proposals, I usually set up a proposal and that with the idea that there's going to be negotiation. Now, when you go for a job interview, that's the same, right? Always set it up to be a negotiation, right? And the thing that's critical, and I wanted to say it's different, but it's actually the same, is that you have one chance to negotiate, right? And the negotiation happens when you are in the sales process. Because once you've set up your business in a certain way and your relationship with the client in a certain way, it's very, very hard to change that perspective, right? So, and I've seen this even with my big corporate jobs. So when I got hired into a very cool company, shall not be named, in Poland, I negotiated with the top chief of staff, right? The big cheese hired me in, and we agreed on the terms and conditions. It was really cool. 2-3 back and forth emails, negotiation done, dusted, right? But then afterwards, any changes to my contract falls into the system. The automation, the machine kicks in, right? Okay, cool. Here's an update on tax. This is it. There's no real, unless the company goes into a space where they say, cool, let's sit down, let's renegotiate. That's very tough to do. So make sure you get the deal done at the beginning. The other thing, sorry,
I would like to add a point.
Yeah, go for it.
Just on this part. This relates to my experience, so that might not be yours. But after having worked 15 years for corporations in both France, Luxembourg, and Poland, I'm going to pinpoint the fact that once you get into a corporation, when you get that salary, you have, I will say, maximum 1% chance. I will say something like 1-2% chance to get a meaningful salary improvement. Yeah. That's very, very rare. What I've seen is if you want to get those 10-15% more, you will have to switch jobs. Yeah. This is something you really... younger folks don't believe us very often, but this is how it works, because it's exactly what you just said. Yeah. Once you get into that job, you're part of the machine, and it's going to be HR or the system who is going to determine how you're going to get a better salary. And you won't be able to change it. So what they give you instead is rank. They are going to give you a bigger rank, a nice title, but don't believe your salary will change that much. No,
it goes back again to what the objectives of your boss is and where they want to get going, right? So if you can't, I mean, I agree. Like a lot of my career jumps and changes in the way that I worked came from actually quitting and then starting a new project. And I actually went back to a company before where, I went back into in a different context. So that is super important. And then I think I just want to jump into the next thing that, there's certain things that you need to think about when you're selling to, right? And I want to be careful here because fundamentally it's really about selling to someone and really thinking in an empathetic way, what is their needs, right? But the other thing I want to say, and this comes along with the story. So years ago in South Africa, we were I had a really cool client, and this was actually a CIO of a big insurance company, right? And I had like really cool access to this guy, and he was really like, he was a super cool guy, and he loved working with myself, my boss, and our team. We had like really cool access to him, right? And at some stage, he contacted me because I was sitting on the sales end. And he said, "Listen, Werner, we've got this other opportunity, also my team, and we want you guys, your company, to pitch for this." Now, I looked at it and I said, "Okay, cool. This is not really my expertise. It fell outside of the design space. It was more of like artificial intelligence, customer experience kind of stuff, heavy tech." Aligned with some strategic stuff, right? I wasn't suited. So I contacted some of my colleagues and I got them to pitch. So I consulted them and they went and they pitched, but I didn't really focus on what they were doing. And at some stage, the pitch went through, and then this guy, this CIO, phoned me and says, "Listen, Werner, you know, I want to work with you guys, but if you're going to send me the same people again in the future, like it's not going to work. It's not going to work out." Because what happened was is that he loved working with us. So we were dressed in jeans. We were like really super focused on the value that we're going to be bringing, and we brought sexy stuff, and we were joking. We had a vibe. My colleagues who went in, they all were dressed up like lawyers, dude. They smelled like money, right? And they were talking stuff that he like doesn't. They made him feel stupid, that he doesn't know what's going on. It was super expensive. It just felt like he's going to be paying a lot of money for he doesn't know what, right? And then the people who pitched against us, they flew some guy in from London who was like walking in there with like multicolored clothes on, being all sexy, super excited about the business, and they won it from us.
Oh no!
So I mean, the lesson for me there is like, don't give up who you are. So I don't want our conversation here to align with the fact that now you have to be someone you're not. Be who you are. Because remember, you're going to be working with this client for a long time, right? And, you know, if you're going to be wearing a tuxedo on the first day, you're probably going to think like you need to wear it all the time, right? And if that's not you, that's also going to be a problem, right? So don't give up who you are. And then,
such a good advice. Yeah.
But then your conversation, everything you do needs to be about the client, because you are there to serve the client or serve your boss or whatever. And of course, don't forget, you're doing that because the other thing is, when you go home after you've done this, you think about you, right? You think about how you're furthering your strategy, how you're going to develop your business. I'm not saying screw yourself over. You want to do business. You want to sell, right? But you're selling to someone who wants to buy what you've got, right? So the other thing I wanted to talk about is the elements that of objections, right? Where will objections come from usually? Because if you do a good proposal, a client will push back. Right, so usually your objections will come back from they don't trust you.
Okay.
They don't have, or there is no element of trust. It's not like this guy doesn't know what he's doing. Like there's absence of trust. There's maybe absence of confidence, and then there's maybe no need for your services. But a lot of us have to proactively go sell a service, right? Some of us react to needs, but some of us go and sell things, right? So there's no need for what you're doing. The other thing that's super important, there's no urgency, right? I'll look at it tomorrow, and the person has no money. Right? And why I've mentioned those things, trust, confidence, money, urgency, and need, is that when you prepare your proposal in your mind or either on the pages, you have to note that down. You need to be ready to answer those questions. So if the person says, I'll come back to you next week, and then you go like, we've got a lot of things going on. We need to close or know about this deal. You know, you need to be creative about how you
need to create that
urgency around and why it's important. Maybe it's aligned with the need because like the competitors are moving quite fast in that area. So it's really super important to prepare yourself on that basis, right? Like what it is. And then the other thing I wanted to say, because we'll go into the elements of a proposal in a few, right? I want to talk about that too, is that the one thing you shouldn't do, dude, is have 15 pages about how cool your company is.
Oh yeah. I know those. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Man, I've been in some of those presentations because I also had people present to me, right? Like they want to use us as a service, and they do that first flick over. And then there's a classic photo of this guy on stage, you know, and he's like being super famous and like, wow, how cool is this guy? And look at all the awesome things they've done, you know, and they like, then they rock out the methodology, right? There's their bespoke kind of tool that they've developed over 2 years of experience about how they can solve the world's problems, right? And, you know, and save children around the planet. And you know what? I don't give a shit, man.
Yeah, we shouldn't laugh. We all did that. You
Hey,
did
I've
that.
been there,
I'm
dude.
sure.
I've
Yeah,
been
I've
there.
been there too. We start and we are like, I mean,
I mean, dude.
this is the template they give you to apply. And when you start, you don't know
Yeah,
better and you just
yeah,
do whatever they tell you, even if you think that, and you think that the party in front of you thinks it's interesting, and both of you
yeah,
knows it's like, it's like those ceremonies for
yeah,
animals when they parade in front of
yeah.
the other. It's pretty much what you're
Yeah, you're
both
doing a
doing.
little happy dance, like look at me. And you know what? This is the worst thing, dude. And I tell you now, like
Tell
because
me.
I'm trying to be Mr. Big Shot here, but I'll tell you now, this happened to me. You go in there and you slap that first slide in, why, and you put why, and then your company name, and then you're not gonna go into a riff about how cool your company is. And you know when the CEO turns to you and says, "Listen, can you skip to the end though? Can we skip this section? Like, can we get into the like." Dude,
Beautiful.
you feel like a
Beautiful.
little bit of a tool, right? So, yeah, in the last few years of doing this thing, and I had a conversation. Partly why we're doing this episode is also I spoke to a mate the other day, and he was like, "Yeah, he's working on this proposal, he's doing this, and like this value." I'm saying, "Cool. So what's the value for client?" No. I'm gonna put the profiles here. I'm going like, you take your profile, your company profile, all this other shit, you put it in the back in the appendix, right? If someone cares about it, they will look at it there. Right? I'm not saying you shouldn't put people in. You need to show where people are going to work and whatever and get to know people and whatever. But like if it's going to be about your pedigree and your mom's like achievements, whatever, put that at the back, right? People can read that in their own time. This is everything is about the client first. Like how are you going to solve the problem? Also, the thing that we used to do as to set context is we did this in ad agency a lot where there's a manifesto so that you open up with a statement that aligns people and get people emotionally involved. But a lot of time what you do is you try and share some perspectives on what is the key challenges that you see in the industry at the moment to kind of get the client to build that little bit of trust so there's an understanding that you actually know what the hell you're talking about without having like a list of things of your achievements to share. And maybe that is also a conversation. Something I've recently really looked at and started practicing is how do you involve someone in the conversation rather than having a presentation, right?
Yeah, that's a good topic.
Yeah. Cool, dude. So I don't know, like I'm talking way a lot today. I wonder if we couldn't just quickly go through the elements of a proposal because we're also kind of running out of time again with me flapping.
I think that's a practical element that people listening to us could use in order to run their proposal because they have been listening to us being like, okay, guys, how do I do that exactly?
Don't do this. And so, I mean, here are a few steps, and we can maybe pop some of this. We can pop these into the show notes too, right? And we'll give a few links to books and stuff that people can look at, right? So first of all, when you do a proposal, first of all, like I mentioned, describe the context, right? Describe what you understand about the company, about the client, about the buyer, right? So that there's an element of trust that comes up. Also about the context in the sense of what you know about the industry. Be super honest so that the conversation can start there, right? The second element that you need to focus on is set out objectives, right? What is the objectives that you want to achieve by working with the client? Remember, we are talking about the objectives aligned with your relationship with the person who is buying. Remember, the buyer, not the gatekeeper, the buyer. How are you going to achieve objectives? Now, sometimes those objectives might be wrong, right? That's cool.
Right.
That's cool because in the meeting, remember, this is all about negotiation. You can discuss those objectives. They might disagree. I've had many times where we present, okay, this is the marketing objectives. And then they go, we don't really agree. We want to tweak that. Oh, okay, cool. Okay, got it. Set down the objectives. Then the other thing is like, what is the measure of success? Because doing the project, and I mean, I've screwed up in this last year, is that you get so excited about what you're going to do, you forget about how you're going to measure what the success is. Because success also tells you how you reverse out into what is it you're going to do, right? Because I spoke to a client this week for like an hour, and we were planning things or whatever, and I said to him, shit, what is our exit behavior? What do we want people to know after this? And if I said that in the beginning of the conversation, I probably wouldn't have wasted his time, right? So you can always work backward from measures. So that is the third one, measure. Value. So what is the value that you're bringing to the table? So first of all, like we said earlier, value for the organization, right? So working with you, what is the value that you're bringing to the table? But then specifically, the value that you're bringing to the buyer, the person who's buying from you, right?
Make him dream.
Yeah, make him dream, dude. And the thing is, I mean, I'm not saying lying, but you're selling, right? And you really need to do your homework. I had a lady that I hired once who actually went to LinkedIn and started in the conversation, and it wasn't creepy. She was quoting back things that I cared about because she studied what I cared about and where I wanted to drive my career. So do your homework about the actual buyer, and then your methodology and your approach to the work. Right, so I said yesterday that, I said earlier that, I'm talking too long, that's why. I said earlier that you shouldn't have like too much about your company's bespoke methodology. However, here, you can bring in how you're going to do the job. So how do you see, how is the thing going to roll out? What's the plan? What is the plan of action, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be in full-on detail, but what is the plan of action? Then the other thing, and there's a lot of discussion about this, and I quite like this. I had a different take on this, but it comes down to adding options. So what is the different things that this is option 1 and option 2. I usually go for 1 or 2 options. I don't want to have too many, like it becomes a sales, like a shopping basket of things. But what is the 2 options? And you put your pricing into the 2 options. The other thing, if you don't want to do options, and potentially you can also combine this with options, is especially for us in the design field, we can't really put like heavy numbers on some of the things we do, right? So it's to put a range price in. So what is the kind of, what are you looking at here? Is it between 10,000 euro and 50,000 euro? Like make it a realistic range. Of course, you have to do your math, right? It's not about sucking it out of your thumb and think what the competitors. What is the range? And also make sure that your lowest range, because the client tends to go for the lowest end, it's not like break even for you, right? But range pricing has really worked well for me because it also keeps you out of trouble, because sometimes you have to go into kind of a scoping phase with the client anyway to adjust some of the pricing, and maybe sometimes you can go cheaper, right? So range or options, and then investments. So what kind of investments are the client looking at? And that's not only like money, but then effort from their side. Who is going to be involved from the client side? People forget that, because sometimes you deliver a service, you're going to have to work with a project manager there, or different people or individuals. Like when a client sees that you're thinking about the impact on their business, oh, okay, cool. So we can have weekly meetings, or I have to pay plane tickets and stuff like that. That makes sense. Bring in the investments, right? And then at the end, quality, right? And I bring quality in 2 elements here. So the one is risk. So how do you minimize risk? So for example, if you're reliant on certain things from the client before doing something or getting to the end of the project, articulate that for discussion, right? The other thing is also, when it comes to quality, a good sales angle here is to see how you can actually shift the quality back to you. So a client is going to be more drawn to you if you kind of make guarantees sometimes around quality. Like what is the baseline quality that you guarantee? What does that mean, right? So there you have it. Like we'll put it in the show notes. This is the 8 kind of levels of elements that you need to put into a proposal that is going to get you damn close, either to negotiation or to actually making a sale.
Yeah, that is very thorough. That is extremely thorough. So Werner, my next negotiation, I will go through you before, and I will go through my 8 steps to make sure that I'm not being burned at the last minute.
So, Jono, we've had an extended session today talking about this, right? So, hopefully, if people have, if they have more questions, because the one thing we haven't really spoken about here is pricing, because you can also look at like consultants rating and pricing. How do you do that, right?
I think pricing could be an episode. It could be
like so if you're interested in finding out more about pricing and how we do it in consulting, and Jono from a design perspective, let us know, because we can talk about pricing. That's a whole different game, because you look at kind of do value-based pricing, which is great, but then most of us have to still do hourly rates and all that kind of stuff, and we can talk a little bit about that too. But Jonathan, I don't know if you have any other things to add, but I was just thinking that a few books that I brought to the table, one of them specifically I think we both like is this one.
Yep.
Never Split the...
Amazing book.
Yeah, this is great. I mean, I've used some of the methodologies here. Never Split the Difference. Negotiating as if your life depended on it, by Chris Voss. Ex-FBI guy, does a lot of consulting stuff. There's some really great gems in here. The other one I would recommend you look at, right? But be warned, there's business stuff in it. It's not necessarily the proposal stuff. And also follow this guy. This guy's called Paul Rulkins. I met him last year. His book is called The Power of Preeminence, High Performance Principles to Accelerate Your Business and Career. Now, I quite like where this guy comes from. Very quirky dude, super knowledgeable. Like, he's got his business stuff down. And then the final one, The Win Without Pitching Manifesto. Check this one out too, because pitching is a whole different conversation. I don't like doing work for free and giving people free concepts. That is not a proposal. Proposals are not coming up with concepts for people for free. So The Win Without Pitching Manifesto is also a nice alignment to that. Now, Jonathan, I know you need to run to a meeting soon, dude.
Yep. And however, I hope you all liked this episode today, Werner. But like,
man,
a lot of truthfulness. I think that was probably one of our most practical episodes in terms of tools we gave to people. So hopefully you will like it. One thing I would like to ask you is, contact us. Tell us what you thought about that episode. Tell us, share with us. You can also go on iTunes and put a nice rating for us.
Oh yeah, please do that. We don't have any feedback, and we have so many cool listeners. I mean, I checked our listenership is really going up. I feel like people are enjoying the shorter shows and being focused on a certain topic, but it's really hard because we get sporadic feedback. So you listening to this right now, please give us some feedback so that we know how we can grow this better. And then also, Jonathan, it would be a miss not to mention where people can find us. So I'm not going to go into the full-on bore thing, but if you go to blockthinking.com, so block without the K, thinking.com. All the links are there. You can also send us messages through SpeakPipe. That means we can actually listen to what you're saying. And once again, send us some love and feedback directly on Twitter if you want to, or any feedback would be highly, highly appreciated.
So thank you for listening to us, and talk to you the next time.
Boom!
Peace.